So for my presentation, I'm going to focus on the logistical and communication challenges I faced at my Wildlife Conservation Society internship. So I don't know how much you all remember about Wildlife Conservation Society, which I will also refer to as WCS from their presentation, but they're a nonprofit organization, and the organization itself is at the Bronx Zoo. They own and operate all the zoos in the New York City area, and they have a global presence in over 60 countries. They are focused on community and science-based conservation. So, the program for interns that they highlighted when they were speaking to us was that they are now working on new efforts in wildlife-friendly farming and climate-friendly farming in the Champlain Valley, which is upstate New York and part of Vermont. So they conducted surveys of farmers in summer 2017, and in summer 2018 they wanted to expand the survey they had already started. So they wanted an intern to be able to analyze survey data, interpret it, expand the survey, and help develop outreach materials based on the survey from farmers. They were also looking for several specific skills in an intern. They wanted somebody who was comfortable talking to farmers and partners, somebody who could easily travel around the Champlain Valley, and someone who had IRB clearance and an interest in sustainable agriculture and food systems. So this is what I was expecting when I received my assignment for Wildlife Conservation Society, but then I got this email. So it turns out that that was not going to be my job. So the new proposal that I got from my supervisor was that in the Adirondacks, the high peaks are experiencing growing use, and as a result, human-bear conflict has increased greatly. So they needed an intern now to assist with outreach to the public about human-bear safety and changing regulations in the backcountry. It would involve working with WCS, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Rangers, Wildlife Unit, and Lands and Forests Unit. They wanted someone to be able to craft effective messages, craft effective messages for print, social media, and websites, and do outreach to organizations and test new communication strategies. She told me that the position could easily be expanded. So then, I'm emailing back and forth with the coordinator of the Adirondack office of WCS about my new role as an intern. And then I found out that unfortunately the Adirondack office of Wildlife Conservation Society is closing. And they weren't sure if it was closing June 30th or September 30th, which is obviously problematic if it was closing June 30th, because then I don't have a job anymore. But then I didn't hear anything from my supervisor for a little while because she was negotiating with headquarters in New York City. But then I found out that it was going to close September 30th, so I still had a job. So the first day of work, I get a third role, and it turns out that the third time is the charm, because this is what I ended up doing. And so it was a combination of doing things with bears and with farming, but I'm going to focus on the farming portion so it doesn't get too broad. So now that I'm working there and everything is ironed out, I had a lot of creative freedom and I could work on whichever projects fit my role. I started visiting farms almost right away, and one of the questions that the farmers asked me was, what is wildlife-friendly farming? And I realized that I didn't have a concrete definition of what that was. So that was my first communication issue, because I couldn't effectively tell them what I was asking them if they were doing. And since I didn't have a definition, they would say, yeah, I'm friendly to wildlife. So my first mission was researching and writing an explicit definition of wildlife-friendly farming. So I wrote a definition using more than 5 sources, so now when farmers asked me what wildlife-friendly farming was, I was prepared. But then I came across another issue because some methods of controlling wildlife are pretty controversial. One example specifically is about coyotes, so you're about to learn a lot about coyotes that you never ever knew. So a lot of farmers think that when a coyote comes onto their farm property, they should shoot it because it could potentially eat their livestock, which it makes sense that that would be their thought process. But lots of researchers have found that since coyotes live in families or packs that hunt in specific areas, when you shoot one member of the pack and kill it, then the pack is destabilized, they're more likely to go out of their region that they normally hunt in, and prey on livestock because that's an easy target. So it's like the farmers versus science at this point. And a scientist published an article in the local newspaper about the science behind why you should not kill coyotes. And this was my second communication because people called the scientific article fake news. And so this has to do with we learned about the information deficit model of science communication. And supposedly, as knowledge acquisition increases, the public opinion should converge with it, but it doesn't always work this way. Because the science did not fit into people's ideas and their habits, they called it misinformation and fake news. And they attacked the credibility of the author and the other people commenting on the article. So here I pulled out some of the comments on the scientific article that was published in the local newspaper, and I highlighted the disparaging insults and the attacking of people's credibility. So that was another issue. So after all of that, I decided to do some research on my own on all the different wildlife-friendly farming techniques that are out there that were mentioned in the survey that Wildlife Conservation Society did in summer 2017 and that farmers told me about personally when I visited their farms. And again, I found some things were controversial. Every farmer that I visited, he believed that he was wildlife friendly, but he was very intensely critical of his peers. And so one specific example, Farmer Dylan, we'll call him, was putting his pigs in the woods, and he said he was doing silvopasture, which is when you integrate how you feed your livestock, and then you can use the trees that are shading your animals, keeping them cool, protecting them from the weather, to harvest for lumber at the end. And then I met with a different farmer, we can call him Farmer Joe, and he was very upset that Farmer Dylan was claiming that he was doing silvopasture because it turns out Farmer Joe has a PhD in forestry. And so this was the information deficit model again, and so public opinion was diverging from scientific opinion in a variety of wildlife-friendly techniques because of a lack of knowledge. So then I was struggling with what type of outreach materials to create because farmers were very critical of the existing resources. They said that there was not enough funding, there was not enough time to implement these practices or do their own research, and that if they did have the time, that the practices were difficult to implement because they were very complex. But then I found Wild Farm Alliance's document, and it solved a lot of my problems that I was having about how to format my document and how to make it the most effective. So I wanted to adopt their idea and put it in the context of the High Peaks farmers, so I got their permission to do so. So here is their document, and so it's actions to take on a continuum from simple to complex, but Wild Farm Alliance is in California, so this is specific to the farms out there, so I wanted to take their idea, which I got permission to do, and adapt it to the Adirondacks. And I also wanted to take the farmers' feedback into consideration because I had received a lot of it from the summer 2017 survey and from what farmers had told me. So I did research on the price of implementing each wildlife-friendly practice, and I created 6 categories: forest management, habitat management, soil management, crop management, livestock management, and wildlife management. I created a scale to rate each of these categories based on difficulty, and I used over 70 sources. I read scientific articles, I called wildlife representatives to ask them what they thought about it, I met with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is a division of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and I even read farmers' blogs. So, after I created my communication document, I distributed it at the WCS office, and then my supervisor loved it so much, she sent it to a whole bunch of people, and the feedback I got was that people loved the design, they thought it was easy to use for farmers, and it synthesized a variety of concepts that had not been put together in a resource before. And a woman from the Lake Champlain Basin program was so excited about my document that she was suggesting funding sources to get it printed professionally, because it was just online as a PDF. So moving forwards, my document has been posted on the Cornell Cooperative Extension website because I worked closely with them this summer. It will be displayed at the Adirondack Harvest Festival in mid-September, and I could also potentially in the future get feedback from farmers because they may have additional insights about the costs and the difficulties of each practice. And also I've considered rating each specific wildlife-friendly practice as opposed to rating each category as a whole. So then I just wanted to go over some highlights of my communication document. So I made sure to define wildlife-friendly farming and climate-friendly farming, and I gave instructions as to how to use it, and I decided to keep the layout simple. So for each practice, I gave a description, and then I detailed the costs, the labor inputs, the benefits, and the challenges. I rated each category out of 5 ratings: most simple, simple, intermediate, complex, and most complex. So here are some pictures of my communication document. So I made it very similar to Wildlife Farm Alliance's, and so this is the most simple, and wildlife management is the most complex. And here are the instructions, and I made sure to put the definitions in big boxes. And then here's an example of a category, which is soil management, the rating of the category, and then the different practices with all of the details about it. And here is another example. So even though my role at Wildlife Conservation Society changed twice, and at one point I wasn't even sure if I had an internship, I persevered through all these challenges. And even though it ended up not being exactly what I expected, I learned a lot and ended up having a beautiful and fulfilling summer and internship. Thank you.